If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Name, image, likeness. Hi, I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. I received an unusual invitation from our athletic department at Dallas Baptist University this month. They asked me to make some video recordings about personal finance for their new NIL program. Well, first, I'm the Christian Economist in macroeconomics, not personal finance. And second, what is NIL? Name, image, likeness is the legal program that allows college athletes to gain their own personal endorsements as of July 1, 2021. Before this ruling, endorsements were allowed at the NCAA level, the conference level, and the university level, but individual athletes were seen as amateurs who could not accept money for their performance. Now, the difference between a professional and an amateur has been significantly clouded over the years, but that's not really my subject today. A Christian Economist wants to know if this is the correct way to distribute goods and services. In this case, the service being provided is the name, image, and likeness of the collegiate athlete. Name, image, likeness. First, the name. See, in current culture, we are known by our name, and that's what college athletes are supplying to demanders in the name, image, and likeness endorsement program. In his book, Jesus Among Other Gods, Ravi Zacharias makes the fascinating connection between current Indian and first century Roman life. He says that back in his home country of India, he's often introduced as the son of his father because in that society, family lineage is important. As a matter of fact, you can pretty accurately identify a person's class in India from their name. Back to my subject. In the first century, names were important. People wanted to know the lineage of Jesus. They were astounded that a person of such great knowledge of the scriptures came from a poor family. People were also known for their geographic heritage. The scripture that asks in John 1:46, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" That probably best applies to the university in this analysis we're doing today. I think it's just fascinating that a person as young as 17 years old has gained enough notoriety to sell his or her name. Actually, I think it's a good thing. See, as the Christian Economist, I support people owning their own goods and services, and that certainly includes the ability to sell their name. I'm also pretty impressed by the early development of young people. My fellow baby boomers tend to disparage the college Gen Zers, but I appreciate these guys. They're differences from my generation as well. I teach a few hundred of them every year at Dallas Baptist University, and they give me hope for the future. So when people say they are lazy or whatever, they have not met my students at Dallas Baptist University. My students show up for macro at 8 o'clock twice a week, engage with their fellow students, and complete the assignments they're given. I love this generation. Okay, name, now image. One of the most popular scriptures about economics takes place when the chief priests were trying to trap Jesus by asking if his disciples paid the temple tax. He famously asked in Luke 20:24, "Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription are on it?" "Well, Caesar's," they said. He said back to them, "Then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." This scripture is often used to justify paying taxes, and it might. Now, Sergei Sedamatov and I explain this in more detail in our book, Biblical Economic Policy. But readers of the scriptures often miss the most important point in the second half of this scripture. Jesus instructs them, give to God the things that are God's. So if the coin goes to Caesar because his image is on it, we should go to God because his image is on us. I explain more details in podcast number 32, titled Made in God's Image. Name, image, now likeness. In the Christian worldview, we attempt to be more like Christ. There's an unpublished book on my computer tentatively titled, There is a God and You're Not It. So we intend to be like God, but not to be God. We're supposed to get our self-esteem not from the products nor services we demand nor supply, not from what we do, but from who we are. Many of the freshmen arrive at Dallas Baptist University seeking clarification about what they should do. When they take the required course called Developing a Christian Mind, they read one of my favorite Christian worldview books. It's titled The Call, and it's written by Os Guinness. He says we have two calls. The first is to be, that is, a follower of Christ. The second is to do. Economics. Now this hits at the nexus of two conflicting principles for the Christian economist. The first is private property. The athlete should own the fruits of their labor. In the past, the NCAA or the university could advertise that a popular player was on their team and they kept the revenue that was generated by the athlete. But by keeping the money from huge events like college football playoffs and men's basketball March Madness, the NC2A redistributes that money from the richer Power 5 conferences to Division II and Division III schools that are smaller. So hold on to your economic hat. The Christian economist is for redistribution? Well, I'm certainly not for forced redistribution, but in this case, the NCAA voluntarily redistributes the revenue. NIL will democratize the endorsement process. Previously, only the NC2A, conferences, and universities could make deals. Now, individual athletes will seek smaller deals, perhaps with local restaurants, maybe car dealerships. Social media will probably come first. A small website can pay a few dollars to an athlete for blogging on their site. It's somewhat equivalent to the internet democratizing information. Okay, it's still early in the NIL era, but so far, average revenues for Division I athletes in July was about $471 for each athlete who was participating, while those in Division II earned about $81 and those in Division III, $47. An economist expects and accepts that division of pay. Division I players are more skilled and probably should be paid more. Competition. This is such an important topic. It became one of my first podcasts, number 7, titled Competition and the Fallen Nature. In the early days of NIL, there are predictions that competition between athletic programs will develop. Student athletes will tend to choose to play for programs that have a more sophisticated NIL program that provides greater revenue for the athlete. Well, NIL athletes will choose universities who offer better financial literacy, social media, and marketing programs. Christian economists like competition. Okay. I worked in pro sports during the first 15 years of my career. Then when I started teaching at Dallas Baptist University, I designed and taught a course in professional sports management. I finally gave it up because I just couldn't keep current with all the details happening in professional sports management. College athletics are not my area of research, but I have noticed that leagues are getting quite spread out. The old Southwest Conference used to consist of between 8 and 13 teams in Texas and Arkansas. Many of the athletes knew each other from high school competitions, and the parents could easily drive to all the away games, so it created a great community among the conference. And now, Virginia Tech is in the Big 12. That's a long ways for parents to drive for a game. Another example, the Division II conference that most of our DBU teams play in is called the Lone Star Conference. Its 19 schools stretches from Fort Smith, Arkansas to western New Mexico. Look, these far-flung conferences must make some economic sense, but they're not good for producing competitive rivalry, and that's the purpose of conferences. Now, through the new NIL endorsements, perhaps athletes will garner local endorsements from more regional enterprises like restaurants and car dealerships. This could produce more local rivalry that I think would return collegiate competition that's more exciting for the players and for their fans. Cartels. The economic definition of a cartel is competitors who collaborate. The 4 major professional sports leagues, Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association, National Hockey League, and the National Football League, are by definition cartels. Baseball gained an exemption from antitrust law in 1922, and the four leagues rely on it still today to behave as cartels. The NC2A is clearly a cartel, but it is a voluntary one. There are a couple of small competitors, the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, called the NAIA, and I suppose you could consider the National Christian College Athletic Association as a competitor, but they're really very small in comparative dollar revenues. So antitrust is an important concept in Christian economics, and I explain more details in podcast 89, titled Antitrust and the Fallen Nature. Private property. When God told Moses that the eighth commandment was, don't steal, he was endorsing private property. That became one of the 10 biblical commandments of economics when Sergei Sedamatov and I wrote Biblical Economic Policy. Athletes who perform well on the field of play should be able to benefit from their labor. This is pretty straightforward for a Christian economist. Think about it. Should pitchers be required to share the earned run average, or batters be forced to share their batting average? Of course not. They earned their performance records and they should own them personally. But they play on a team and they contribute to the team's performance. So could the conference be considered just a larger team? Well, maybe the NC2A could be considered that way. When it comes to revenue, the player should own his or her own performance record and the financial rewards that go with it. I unpack more details about this important topic in podcast number 81, titled simply Private Property. An argument could be made that the amateur athlete has the opportunity to turn pro. I have some experience with this, having worked for the Association of Tennis Professionals for a few years earlier in my career. And that was not long after the sport went pro in 1972. The guy I worked for, Bob Briner, went to Australia and signed up the best players to professional contracts. He was working for Lamar Hunt at World Championship Tennis at the time. Previous to this, pro players were locked out of the largest tournaments because they were amateur events. The formation of the Association of Tennis Professionals, for whom I work, forced the tournaments to open their entry to amateurs and pros. And now you know why the U.S. Open is called Open. In colonial days, there were state churches. Some energetic Baptist pastors were disallowed from preaching in states that had state churches. They appealed to Thomas Jefferson, who famously wrote to them saying there should be a separation of church and state, more specifically, a wall of separation. See, if I was TJ's consultant, I might have advised him to keep the state churches, even though I would not have liked the social pressure to attend church. Just to function in society? Well, I would have approved of the outcome. Why? Arthur Brooks explains it in his book, Gross National Happiness. Quote, people who live in religious communities, even correcting for other cultural factors in those communities, do better financially than those who live in secular communities, end quote. Back to Jefferson. He was a pretty strict supporter of freedom. He would support NIL today, and Christian economics does as well. I'm Dave Arnott, the Christian Economist. Fear God, tell the truth, earn a profit. See you next time. For more information, please visit us online at davearnott.com. If you have questions or suggestions for future podcasts, please submit them online or in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.